Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Analyze Scripts. I am so excited to talk about an amazing movie today called Inside Out 2. We both
Inside
saw it in
Out 2.
theaters. You saw it
Mhm.
twice. I
I've
saw it
seen it twice.
once.
It's been
I
out for what, like 5 days?
Yeah. Was it packed when you saw it?
Yes. There were a little more open seats, but it was like a Tuesday at 5, so,
Okay.
it was packed the first time I saw it on opening day. I feel like everywhere I'm reading about or hearing about people seeing it, the theaters are packed.
Mhm.
And it had, like, the biggest box office premiere since Barbie from last
That's
year.
wild.
I know, but also that makes me so excited as
Mhm.
a psychiatrist and a parent. Also, I think it confirms that we have really good taste, Portia, about
That's true.
what's hot
That's true.
and, what people want to hear about.
I like
So if
that.
you're
Yeah.
listening, you have good taste too. Thanks for
Yeah.
sticking around. Thanks for joining
And,
us.
I think if you are on the fence, if you're listening to this and haven't seen Inside Out 1 or 2, I think it's so worth it, like, kind of regardless
Oh,
of how old you are.
100%.
I'm also assuming that you have if you're
100%.
listening to this, but you never know.
I saw a funny meme on Instagram. I think I posted it to our account where it was like, from Billy Madison, where Adam Sandler's like sitting on the rug with the kindergartnens. And it was
Yes.
like me as an adult going to see Inside Out 2. And it's like, that's
Yes.
me.
No, I love that. I saw some
I love
reviews,
it.
online. I feel like they're mostly good. I feel like some people there's, like, some nitpicking that
Yeah.
that's my, like,
Yeah.
opinion. I feel like they're a little nitpicky, but, generally, I feel like it's
What did you see that
amazing.
was nitpicky? I feel like what can you nitpick?
More of, like, I think movie buffs with, like, the plot or, like, wanting like, seeing, opportunities for more development, like, things that, like, I, as, like, a layperson movie just, like, enjoyer would never notice. Someone, like,
Mm.
wanted more of the characters that we met in when they were repressed in the vaults,
Oh,
and just, like,
yeah.
feeling like that missed the mark or, like, just some I feel like more, technical things,
Mm.
but I don't
My
know. Did
son
you see
does keep
anything about the plot?
well, my son keeps saying over and over, it should be longer, it should be longer, which
Okay.
I think is actually
And that's a
praise.
kid, so who,
Yeah.
like, right, you'd think would want, like, shorter, but, like, so I think
Right,
that's
no, but
saying
he wants more.
something. Mhm.
And so we keep talking about, like, do you think there'll be a third one? I hope we just keep going with, like,
I
every stage
know.
of Riley's development. Also because, like, I'd really love to see Nostalgia and what she brings to the table for, like, even, like, a short, Like, I thought she was so
Yeah.
cute. I
I
loved
think it was June Squibb was the actor who was reading for
Oh,
Nostalgia, and
just
I
so
just
cute.
thought it was adorable, like, "Oh," like,
So
I'm
sweet.
and they were
Oh,
like, "We don't
remember
need you
when we
yet."
all
Yeah.
I know. They're like, "Remember when we all made the team?" And they're like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
it just happened,"
Yeah.
or like, it
That
was
was
so
yesterday.
cute. Oh,
It
but I
was
would, like, love to just
perfect.
keep having more and more
Mhm.
of them.
Yeah.
I was just looking at this New Yorker article, which I feel like is, like, kind of, like, critical,
Hmm.
just saying, like, it's wild that Riley had an inability to locate even the slightest middle ground, and I was like, "Hello, she's 13, like, that's totally accurate, like, what are you talking about?"
Really
And they're talking
interesting.
about how, like, they feel like they had to turn anxiety into a villain, and I was like, this is what it says. That driver, it turns out, is the need to turn anxiety into a villain, bent on molding Riley into a success. She functions as the latest catalyst for what has become a familiar theme in family friendly animation. Drive and perfectionism will destroy you. Don't try to control what you can't control. In my mind, I'm like, what's wrong with that? Like, where's the lie?
I don't know. You know what that makes me think of is like when I work with a lot of teens, you work with a lot of parents of teens. And sometimes it's like a lot of kind of reminding gently the parents that like what your teen is doing is normal, even though it's really hard and like
Yeah.
scary and,
Hmm.
really intense. We see the mom's brain like, we've prepared for this. And it's like, you really
Yes, yes.
haven't. I feel like no
Right?
matter, you could think of, or you could know so much. You could be a
Hmm.
therapist, but I still think that a lot of it's just like this is okay. Like your teen like might say they
Yeah.
hate you and like they really
Right.
99% of the time like do not hate you. Like they're just so overcome
The
with
fact that they can
emotion.
say it, I think,
Mhm.
is a good sign,
True.
right? Because that means they know that hopefully, unless they're, like, saying it because you've just done something, like, really egregious or really bad, Otherwise, if you like give them a consequence and they say, "I hate you,"
Mhm.
that means that they know you can tolerate their big, scary little red anger person
Yeah,
inside of them.
and
And
still
I
be
think that's
there.
actually a good sign.
Mhm.
Exactly. That they can
Yep.
say it and you're not going anywhere. Like I say that to my patients a lot when it comes to toddlers, which I don't, in some ways are very similar to teenagers, just in little different contexts, right? But in terms of like the intensity with the emotions and
Mhm.
stuff, I don't know. So anyway, this New Yorker article I'm gonna have to read further, but it felt like adults just like criticizing it. But like that part really stuck out to me because I thought, like, yeah, that is what they were getting at, but like that is what happens. And
Right.
what's the criticism here?
Hmm.
So anyway, if you can't tell, we loved this movie.
Yeah,
10
now
out
I'm
of
like,
10.
send that to
Rotten
me, I wanna
Tomatoes
read it.
100%, Analyst
Yeah.
Scripts rating 100%. Like
Mhm.
I love this movie and I feel like I've been so excited for this to come out. I feel like it was just about a year ago, Portia, we recorded our episode on Inside
Yeah.
Out 1
Mhm.
and like we had to cut like a lot of the end because we were talking about like why they should make an Inside Out 2 and how we were going to start like a change.org petition. And then like immediately after we Googled it and we're like, oh my God, it's coming.
Yeah, like, they're
Great.
already in production. Okay, never mind.
Great. They didn't need our
Mhm.
input.
Yeah,
But as you
exactly.
could probably tell, they did use a lot of input from some bigwig psychologists, which I think is so great and also so cool. And like, if you ever want our take, like, just let us know.
Mhm.
But I know that they used Kristen Neff, Dr. Kristen Neff, who does a lot of work about self compassion. And I feel like you could really tell that they had psychological input
Mhm.
just because of how smart they
Yeah.
depicted everything.
Mhm. Yep, no, I totally agree, and really quick, not that she needs any more, promotion, but Kristen Neff has wonderful, like, mindfulness, meditations that are, like, 5 minute, 15, 20, 30,
Hmm.
all about self-compassion for yourself and, like some suffering things, like, it's just
Hmm.
everyone should check it out, it's free, you can Google it and find it that way, but getting back to
Ooh.
kind of like parents, I loved when they showed all of the islands and how Family Island was
Yes,
now really
it's true.
small.
Yes. Again, that's like 100%. I loved
Mhm.
when they were like, "Oh, thank God Boy Band Island finally broke up." And I was like, "In my mind, it hasn't.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, it's still really
Mhm.
there."
Yep,
You
it's still
know?
fully
Backstreet
formed.
Boys for life.
Mhm.
Fully formed.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I don't know where to start. I feel like we could just talk about every single thing about this movie and how much we loved it. I don't know. Where do you think we should start?
Maybe with like some of the friend stuff. I feel like
Yeah.
just that kind of flows throughout the movie. So even like noticing like the friendship island is like huge and massive and
Huge.
like kind of the center of Riley's brain, which is again so
Totally
appropriate for
appropriate.
that time, right? And that
Mhm.
shift
Mhm.
of like we've covered
Mhm.
Erickson's stages of development and how, you're
Mhm.
kind of like going out into the world, typically, ideally with a good attachment from your parents. So you feel
Mhm.
safe to kind of like do some scary
Exactly.
things and then
You can
come
always come
back.
back if you need to.
Mhm. Exactly. So I loved that. I think it was like right off the bat, okay, like this is accurate and friends are everything and hopefully they're good friends.
Yeah. And these two,
Mhm.
Bree and her name's escaping me. But they do seem like good friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you notice that in um in everyone's little brains? So I was reading in one of the psychiatrist Facebook rooms I'm in. Of course, everyone's like, we're inside out too, like all over the place. And someone pointed out that in mom's brain, sadness is the center, like driving emotion. In dad's brain, it's anger. And then in Riley's brain, it's joy. And I thought
Hmm.
like that was really interesting. And then when I went to see the movie a second time, I was paying a little more attention. And I noticed that for Riley, her inside emotions are a mix of boy and girl characters. But in the other two girls, they're all females. And
Huh.
I think for mom and dad, mom is like all female, dad is all male. And I just wondered, like, I wonder if that'll go anywhere. And then with like her deep dark secret, I was really like, analyzing it.
Mhm.
Because I do think this is the time in a young person's life, if not earlier, where you start to wonder about, especially I think nowadays, gender identity, sexual identity, things like that. I couldn't
Mhm.
tell at the very beginning, like with Val, if she looked up to her or if she had a crush on her. And again, I think like at that age, that's sort of tracks. But I thought that was interesting. I didn't pick that up the first time around. I did pick it
No,
up the
I
second
didn't.
time. It might not mean anything, but I just thought it was interesting. And I wonder, like, if we keep going, what that means.
Mm. Yeah, and even like in a even not thinking of Riley, like just thinking of how we identify or find our identities and how like that kind of comes to be throughout adolescence into like 20s. And
Yeah.
obviously it can like shift around, but that is interesting. Like, are we all kind of born with two right sets and then we like lean through our own identity exploration one way or the other? Like, oh, I really like that. Hmm.
Yeah. And even like if you identify as a girl, there might be parts of you that feel more masculine
Mm-hmm.
or more feminine. Same thing if you identify as a boy, right? I think like in our day and age, like I think some people, there's a lot of talk about gender identity and stuff like that. But I think if you can just look at it sort of from a bird's eye view, like I think we could all agree there's parts of us that might lean one way or another
Mm-hmm.
way. And that those things are just like social constructs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like boys wear pants, like why? Like,
Yeah.
boys have short hair, like why? But those
Mm-hmm.
sorts of things that inside of us maybe feel either more quote unquote masculine or feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that they really used hockey as like the stage for this whole film, and that it was like an aggressive sport and that it was the girls playing it. Like I loved
Yeah.
that. What did you think about that?
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We're kind of in the Northeast. I think both of our families, are into hockey, which is like not
Mhm.
everyone. I feel like, of course there's a national league. Yes, like people do watch it. The finals are happening right now
Yeah,
when
the
we're
cup.
recording it.
Yeah.
Exactly. But I do think it's also like a little bit, I don't know if this is true, but like more of just a little bit of a
Niche
less popular sport, right?
than
Like
like football. I think you could see
basketball,
that. Yeah.
soccer even. Like I think there's
Right.
so many other sports that like I think still could have been okay at kind of giving like a more neutral or like pushing the boundaries with like women playing it, but
Mhm.
like hockey is so in my, gender
Mhm.
biased head, like, aggressive and
Yeah.
there's not
Sweaty.
a lot of girls leagues. It's not there's not like as
It's
equal
not as popular
exactly.
for girls as like maybe lacrosse or tennis or
Mhm.
another sport. And also like she's in San Francisco, right? Which like I don't think of as like a hockey hub, but you find that she's found her own community. And I also love that it sort of is sending that message that you can keep doing what you enjoy doing and find people kind of
Mhm.
wherever you are.
Mhm.
But I loved that hockey was like the
Yeah.
stage and that they kept going with the hockey,
Mhm.
right? I would have loved whatever they picked, but I think especially just with that aggressive element and the
Mhm.
perfectionism and seeing her like wake up early and do the drills and just say like, okay, when anxiety is like, okay, now we got to do it that way every single time. I'm like, this is what it feels like.
Mhm.
Like, this is what it feels like. Like, I bet like Serena Williams would identify with that,
Yeah.
you know?
How much and this
Simone
is
Biles, I bet.
we're kind of I'm like being, skeptical here, but like do you think that Riley is a little bit also like type A? If we think about like personality, this isn't really clinical, but like just with it, like, is it anxiety? Yes, of course. But how much of it also is like her personality development where, I see a lot of these kinds of patients in my practice where it's like the whole big picture of like you have anxiety, you have that perfectionism like streak, you're a people pleaser,
Mhm.
like kind of on and
Yeah, I
on
have no
like a
idea what you're
that
talking about,
profile.
yeah. Mhm. Yeah, we would have
Are we
no
just
idea
talking
what you're
about
talking about.
ourselves? Because,
Yeah, I don't
yeah.
know.
But I don't know. Like, I think that's too, like, it's just
Did
like a
I see myself in
profile.
Riley? Yes. No, I totally agree. She
Yeah.
runs on the neurotic side, and I loved that when the parents were dropping her off at hockey, they're both a little anxious. Like, mom's like, "Okay, did you get your keys? Did you get your
Hmm.
phone? Do you have your deodorant? Don't forget this, blah, 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 blah." And it was just like I felt like it was just enough of a whiff of like,
Hmm.
"Hmm, maybe it runs in the family."
Yeah.
And we know anxiety is highly genetic. It totally
Hmm.
can. And when
Hmm.
you're raised in an environment with anxious parents, you sort of internalize that and the world does feel like a little less safe, right? So I just loved that.
Yeah, I loved the deodorant emphasis. And like that one scene where Riley is right, she's like in her bed before camp and she's like having right this like
Yes.
meltdown and she's like, I smell, I'm not good at anything, like life is over, I'm scared. And you just see this whole like explosion of emotions. And
I
the
loved it.
smell part to me was just like hilarious because how like I feel like, you're just like, why do I smell all of a sudden? Like, what's
I
happening,
know.
right? Like maybe you're getting your
Right.
period, maybe things are like, getting a little roused here and there. There's a lot of things
Yeah.
happening that are scary.
A lot of body things happening. Yeah,
Hmm.
no, I loved that when like the puberty light was like blinking, and then I loved like demo day, and they put up the little
Yes.
sign like puberty is messy,
Yes.
and they're all like so confused, like who's coming in, like what's going
Why aren't
on,
you
like what's going
fixing
on with
this
the
right away?
console?
Yeah.
Yeah, like what this, and then every time the emotions tried to like touch the console a little bit, it was like a huge feeling, and it was like, yes,
Yes.
this is adolescence. Like it was
Hmm.
so great. I loved that, and just her like mood swings all over
Hmm.
the place.
Yep.
I
And
loved
that
that.
little, I think, like parent comedy with the
Yeah.
like construction
The
never being
mom.
done. It's like,
Yes.
oh, of course, like you can never find your contractors. They're always, like takes 5 months. And I was just like, that's funny. That's
Yeah,
for
going on
adults.
a lunch
Like,
break. Yeah,
hmm.
yeah, exactly, and I loved in the mom's head, it was like, "All right, God, girl, we have planned for this. We know what to do," and the mom, like, sits down so calm, starts talking about a butterfly, and then Riley's like, "Rah!" I
Yeah.
just thought it was, like, so great. I thought it was
Hmm.
so great.
Yeah,
Oh.
couldn't have made it better. I was crying. I saw it with my mom and she like I don't think
Mm,
thought it was going to be good. Like I don't know, she's like a movie go see her. It's also like for little kids. She loved it. She was dying. She was like,
I
"That was
bet.
you." Like, I can't believe that. And I was like, "Yeah, I know." And that was probably you
It
too.
was all of us. It was
Mhm.
all of us. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
all of us.
Yep.
So there's
So,
so many things that I love.
mhm.
What did you think about, staying on the Friends theme when they're in the car, going to the hockey camp, and Riley, like, picks up, "Oh, her face looks different."
Mm.
And then, like, they all, like, zoom in, like, and
Mhm.
are hyper analyzing each other's faces. What'd you think of that?
I loved it. I think that's so much of the what's unsaid or like right like I just know she doesn't like
Mhm.
me or I know that they're like planning things behind my back. Like it just you
Mhm.
know how that feels and I think you start to
Yes.
notice those things in adolescence. Like you're like picking up on these little micro,
Mm.
expressions and
The number 11.
subtleties.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought they like just the zooming in, the pausing, the like back and forth when they were like 11 11 11 I was like
Yeah.
it was just amazing. And then the other emotions like coming and be like, I got this. Like this is my day to
Yes.
shine,
Yeah, yeah.
perfect. Mhm.
I know, like, things like that I just thought were so great, and I love in general what I love about these films is that they are depicting such abstract, difficult to explain concepts in such engaging, beautiful, unique, concrete ways that kids can get. Like, as a parent, I love taking my kids to see these movies, and I have loved the conversations that have come out of them. And it's been really interesting because my kids, obviously they're two different ages and at different stages of development. And seeing, like, hearing their own individual takes have
Mm.
been so interesting. Like, my daughter, who's younger, when we were going to see it a second time, they were like, by the way, they want to see it again next time in 3D, I've been told, which they did make. So I'll
I
go.
saw it in
Um,
3D.
you did? What?
Yeah. It was really
What?
good.
What? Was
In
Pouchy
what
3D?
in the one that we go to with the
Yeah,
seats
yeah,
that
yeah.
fall back.
Yeah. What was 3D?
Um, just like some of the stuff came at you, like, the memory balls or things just seemed
Ooh.
bigger, when you were on like the stream of
Ooh.
consciousness, you were like in the
Oh.
stream. It's
Oh,
definitely worth it. I think it'd be
cool.
like a new way for them to enjoy it again.
I will, like, go all the time. But my daughter had picked up, she was like, anxiety is a bully. And she can't really say her L's quite yet, so it's really adorable the way she says it. But I was like, huh, tell me more, obviously tell me more. And she was saying, like, because when anxiety came around, anxiety put all the other emotions in that jar and sent them away. And that's being a bully, not playing with everyone. You got to play with everyone.
And you're
And I
like,
love
there's the
that take.
concept even of like they all matter. It's like it's even in
Right.
her interpretation, like seeing it, I don't know,
Exactly.
like it's like this is how the movie was made and she's like here, but it's a whole new concept that still is important, that still is like a very
Yeah.
great message to take away.
Right, right.
Mm.
And I loved that. And then hearing my son who's older just talking about like, "Oh, what is anxiety? Like, I think I've felt that before." And, just talking through that and feeling like, "Oh, okay, other people feel this too." And then we talked about at the end, which I think we'll get into, when they showed the different grounding techniques to like come out of it. Like we had talked
Mm.
about that. And then the second time we watched it, he was like picking it up. And in my mind, I'm like, please internalize this, please internalize this. Like, please remember this when you feel nervous, that there's
Mhm.
like things you can do to help yourself feel better. Um, so I just loved so much of this movie, and I loved that they basically were all the whole like plot was about Riley's sense of self and how that's changing and evolving. And
Mhm.
that's exactly what's happening at that age, right?
Yeah.
That it's becoming less black and white, or you hope it is.
Mhm.
It's less black and white. It's becoming more gray, and you're able to tolerate all of it. And so I just loved how they, just displayed like the back of the mind and how Joy's trying to get rid of all the negative
Yes.
emotions and keep everyone positive, and how, when they go back there and when they go to like the spot that's like your sense of self, how those thoughts become beliefs, or those memories are creating your core beliefs, depicted by the strings, the
Mhm.
tethers, and how like as you move to the end of the movie, those tethers become multicolored, not just one color. It was just like, oh, I loved it so
Mhm.
so much.
Yeah.
And then at the very end, when like all the emotions come together and the sense of self has the positive and the negative, oh, chef's
Mhm.
kiss. Like I
Yeah.
just loved it.
Mhm.
I just
I mean,
loved it.
sense of self, I think, is such a interesting concept to talk about in therapy. Like, I think it's really the base of
Yes.
internal family systems. It really comes up a lot in acceptance and commitment therapy, and all of them. But I think that we use those specific
Right,
words in
existential
those.
psychotherapy, even like CBT,
Yeah. Yep.
like psychodynamics,
Hmm.
everything.
Yeah.
Like just being a human, just wondering about your life.
And people really struggle when you ask them, like, so what do you think of your sense of self? What are your core beliefs? And I think
You're like,
you like
"Hmm,
sometimes the therapist role is like pointing them out and being like, okay, like I'm hearing you interpret these experiences kind of over and over in the same way. And like I'm hearing this belief come up a lot. Like, what do you think about that? Kind of exploring like where do we think that came from? Is it does it serve us?
mhm,
Does it not? Is it useful anymore? Maybe it did serve us in the
mhm."
past. I feel like a lot of IFS stuff,
Right.
but I really liked how you could see it kind of changing when anxiety kind of like took over, with a lot of
Yes.
thinking errors or like beliefs that are based in anxiety as like a
Fear. Yeah.
clinical, like more diagnosis than, oh,
In the
I'm having
clinical sense
anxiety
of the
before a
word.
test. Exactly.
Right, right.
What did you
Right,
think about that?
exactly. Oh, I loved it, and I loved how once anxiety took up, first of all, the way they color like, anxiety's perfect. Like, just
The
perfect. The little
hair.
orange person with the hair everywhere,
Mhm.
coming in with a million suitcases, like, so perfect. I loved it. I have wanted to all week tell all my patients with anxiety, like, "You need to go see this
Mhm.
movie." Like, you need to go see it because
Mhm.
you will feel so seen
Exactly.
and validated. But I noticed that when anxiety took over, the beliefs started to shift to this if then way of thinking. Whereas before, her inner sense of self, I loved when they like touched the tether and it said, "Mom and Dad are proud of me." And Joy said,
Mhm.
"Oh, an oldie but a goodie." And I was like, yes, but it shifted from I'm a good person to I'm not good enough. And then by the end, we have a mix of everything. But I like the anxious beliefs really were like, if I don't make the team, then I won't have friends. Or if I don't do this, then Val won't like me. Like a lot of if
Mhm.
then statements, which I think
Mhm.
do underlie a lot of anxiety, right? That fear of something really bad happening.
Yep.
Um, and I just loved it.
The idealization of Val too, I thought was just spot
Yes.
on, right? Like this older
Yes.
person who you look up to. And again, I think in the beginning it wasn't clear if it was like there's a like a little romantic interest, or if it was just like, wow, like she's the best. She made the team when she was a freshman, and
Yes.
I want to be
Right.
her. And then the hair dye with the little red and matching. But like how, because you don't really have a true sense of self, until
Mhm.
later. I think that's showing
Mhm.
how influenced you are when you're in middle
Yes.
school and high school by
Yes.
others, and and beyond. We're
Right.
always influenced a little bit, but like how that can be everything, and how I think parents are like, where did this come from, right? Like, why do you like this music all of a sudden, or
Oh,
why do you
yeah, when the
dressing like
mom's like,
this?
did she join a gang
Yes.
when she was there?"
Uh-huh. Right. And it's just like, I don't
Oh,
know. I hope this also reminds a lot of parents. It certainly did for me, just as an adult, of like my anger outbursts, that looking back, I'm
oh,
like, oh my gosh, that was like ridiculous. Like the world was not over, but
yeah,
it feels that way so
I
intensely. Like
know.
that's
And if
real.
parent yeah, exactly, and I think as a parent, it is hard and it's a lot to, like, bear the brunt of all those intense feelings, but
Mhm.
again, it's like, if you can do your best, and none of us do this perfectly, trust me. If you can do your best to try to stay calm, like, be your child's space of calm rather than matching their energy, like, that's the goal. It's impossible to do right all the time,
Mhm. Yeah,
or at
because
least I
guess what?
try so
Mom
much, I'll
and dad
try.
also have that little anger guy who's like
Yeah.
gonna take over the
Right!
switchboard sometimes and just be like, enough.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly.
Yeah.
What did you think about the other new emotions?
I loved Ennui, like,
I know.
the
Ah,
disdain for just, like, "This is so
ah.
boring, like, you're so annoying, like, get
And
me
I
out of
even loved when
here."
Ennui had to get up, how he, like, slid, you
Yes.
know?
Uh-huh.
First of all, had you heard of Ennui?
Yes,
You
in
had.
the
I
sense of,
hadn't.
like, it's one of those, it's part of this, like, concept that I learned about, I think, in grad school that was, like, um maybe like a cultural context, how like there's words to describe like feelings in a lot of other languages,
Mhm.
cultures that we don't have, and that was one of them.
Okay.
But like I didn't know that that's what it meant. I just knew that that was like an
Mhm.
emotion that we don't like
Yeah.
talk about or or like, have on our charts here.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Cuz it's not
Yeah.
just boredom. We have bored. It's like this extra I feel like we could just pull it up,
Like,
but
almost like a listless feeling.
yes. Mhm.
Just sort of like a, but then I loved how they showed how sometimes you need that to, like, bring you back down, like, when they were
Mhm.
like, "That's what pockets are for," and she, like, puts her hands in the
Yep.
pockets, like, I just love that, but
Mhm.
it really showed that it was like ennui isn't anhedonia, which,
Right.
what that means clinically is, like, when you're really, really depressed, you just feel like everything is duller and, like, nothing really brings you joy anymore. You're just kinda like, "Eh," and sometimes you're bothered by that when you're depressed, sometimes you're so depressed you're not bothered by
Mhm.
it. It felt like ennui was different than that,
Mhm.
like, ennui was content being ennui. Ennui wasn't upset about it, ennui's just, like,
Right.
on their phone, comes in when you need it, and that's it, like, not trying too
Mhm.
hard.
Mhm.
Like, the antidote to perfectionism in a way, but,
Mhm.
like, I, as a Yale trained psychiatrist, like, had not heard of that word, so I
Mm.
just wanna say that, like, if you hadn't either, that's okay.
Yeah.
And also, it totally reminded me in my residency training when we would have Yale medical students with us, like, doing interviews and stuff, and they'd do their presentations, like, many times they would use these really big words that I didn't understand. They specifically used the word loquacious all the time,
Mm.
which I think means talkative, and it wasn't till way later I realized that, like, on their template for the mental status exam of, like, how to describe people, they just had, like, really fancy words, and so that's how they knew all the words, but I had a
Interesting.
lot of, like, imposter syndrome as their resident being like, you're using big words, like, I don't know what these mean, like,
You're like, "Let me come back in
wow, you're
5 minutes." You're
smart."
like, "Yes, they were talkative." Like, got good at,
Yes,
good job.
exactly, exactly.
I
Exactly.
loved,
My little
emb
anxiety
yeah.
was, like,
Oh my
popping up.
gosh. Yeah, what does this mean? We have to prepare for this. Now I have to go home and study. Oh my gosh, I'm not
Oh,
good enough. Like, here we are.
yeah. Hello.
Embarrassment, hello,
Oh,
loved everything about the sweat.
oh.
Joy's like, "Oh, okay, a little bit of sweaty palm there, buddy."
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And at the end when, like, embarrassment's, like, getting more comfortable and then is like, "Oh, no, I went too far," and, like,
mhm,
pulls the sweatshirt close. It was so great. I loved Envy and her teeny tiny feet, just, like, tiptoeing
mhm,
around. Like, I just loved Envy. And I
mhm,
loved how at one point I wrote down a line that Envy said that really hit me. It was after, Riley and had gone to the pizza night with Val, and Envy says, "How do we be our best self if our new or no, how do we be ourself if our new self isn't ready yet?"
Mm.
It was just like, yeah, isn't that the question?
Yeah. And
Oh,
even like seeing her downplay that musical artist that she really liked, right? And then her
oh,
friends come in and are like,
yes.
"What do you mean? Like we just
Get
went
up
to
and
that
glow.
concert." Yeah, and she's still like, "Oh
And
yeah, like."
sarcasm. Oh, and that it was a chasm. I was just like, this is hilarious.
And I
Hilarious.
think that to like I don't know if a young kid would get this, but I thought it was so funny. Like the chasm was almost like interpretations too, because I think like
Yes.
things get right like missed in like
Yes.
communication sometimes. So they're saying like,
Right.
"Oh, we're so glad you're here," like that's great, and how someone
Right. And then
else can be like, "So glad you're here."
yes. Yeah. That was so funny and like so smart. It
Hmm.
reminded me of like in the first movie when there was when they were on like the little train and they were talking about like fact or fiction. It doesn't matter, like stuff or fact or opinion, like just
Yes.
these little things that are just so smart. Like I
Hmm.
just loved it.
Hmm.
Um, So before we really get into analyzing anxiety and the projector and the swirling and the panic, which I just want to like really dig into, I have to know what your thoughts were about Bluefy, and and then the what was the guy's name? Lance
Like the
Slashblade
video
in the
game
Deep Dark
guy.
Secret.
Hmm.
Yes.
So I
And how
think
she had like a crush
Bluefy,
on him.
yeah, was supposed to be like Dora, right? Like with the backpack, but it was like pouchy.
And yeah, and, yeah, Pouchy, and that's so Mickey Mouse Club, they
Mm,
have, of course, now the name's escaping me, but they have this, like, special clock they call in to help. There's always this stuff. Reminded me of
yeah.
Blue's Clues too for, like,
Mhm.
our generation.
Mhm.
Oh my god, it was so funny. They're like,
Mhm.
"Here's an onion and an apple."
Yeah. And a key. Which one? And then they turn to the, screen. A reviewer thought that that was really well done, like having the different types of animation. So we have like the video
Yeah.
game character, and then we have the kind of like flat 1D Bluefy, who's
Yes,
then like talking to
Bluefy.
the audience and being like, "Hi, like can you call Pouchy here?" And the person was like, it was kind of all adults in my theater, and he's like, so no one was like, "Bluefy, can you come here?" But really cute.
I
I
think
thought that
everyone
was
was
awesome.
confused.
Mhm.
And I loved, like, when they call Bluefy back, and then there's, like, all this dynamite in the
Yes.
closet. They're like, "Do you have anything else besides dynamite?" And then
Mhm.
Bluefy gets a little sassy, and he's like, "What do you want from me?"
Yeah.
It was just so funny.
We're, like, under a
And
lot
then
of
at the
pressure
end
there.
when they show yeah, at the end when they show that Anger's wearing Bluefy as, like, a fanny pack now, like, that's, like, where Bluefy's new home.
Mhm.
I
'Cause of the
loved it.
dynamite, probably.
Yeah, probably,
They're,
right?
like,
They
best friends
bonded.
now.
Oh.
I loved it. I thought it was
Oh,
adorable.
and the
I
video
loved the
game character,
jar.
oh my gosh.
Yes.
Yes.
Which is, like, I think one of those things where you are kind of in middle school, and I wasn't, like, embarrassed about this, but, like, my repressed, like, crush was definitely Draco Malfoy, I think. Like, he would be in the vault,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like, being like, "Oh,
He'd
I
be
don't
in the
like
vault,
money now.
yeah.
Like, I'm too cool for that now. Like, I don't like Harry
Yeah,
Potter."
yeah, yeah.
I
I
I do
also,
have a
like, as
podcast
a
about Harry
kid
Potter.
that's how cool we are.
Yeah.
I do remember as a kid though, like finding like animated characters, being like, "Ooh, they're cute." Like I remember Max from a Goofy movie, and like that's like an animated character, right? But it's just like you're dancing and singing. Like
Mhm.
obviously that's my thing, right? Boy Band Island is still like alive and well in my mind. But so I just thought that was like so adorable.
Mhm.
And the second time we watched the movie, we stayed all the way through the credits, and the credits were really long. But I actually liked showing my kids like how much teamwork it takes to put together a movie like this. And they really credited like so many people. And then at the very end, they wrote the names of all the children that were born like while they were making this, which I thought was really cute.
Mm.
And then at the end, you learn what Riley's deep dark
So
secret
I
is.
didn't stay.
Yeah. Do you want to know what it is?
I do. So spoiler
What
alert, but
spoiler
here it
alert.
is. Yeah, I wanna
What do you
know.
think it is?
I have no idea. Like, is it like she doesn't really like hockey, or she
It's
did
not
something
that
really
serious.
bad? Is
Yeah.
it okay?
So I thought it was gonna be something like really serious, like, oh my gosh, do I like girls or like something like really serious? But it is that she burned a hole in the rug
Okay.
in
And she's
childhood.
taking that to the grave.
Taking it to the grave. It is in the vault. It is suppressed. I
Mhm.
love the depiction of suppression and denial. I just liked all of that. And I love how, in general, like, again, I could just analyze this movie forever and ever and ever. Um, they basically, like joy and all the other emotions, had to like blow up the back of the mind and
Mhm.
ride those memories back to the front to not restore her sense of self, but like rebuild it in a way that feels more authentic. And isn't that what we do in therapy? Like, that's what we
Yes.
do. And I loved, like, when they called back to Bluefy, which is like calling back to your childhood and unpacking it, like unzipping that,
Mhm.
taking the stuff out. It's just like such a beautiful metaphor that so often we do need to process and unpack things from our childhood that maybe contributed to this skewed sense of ourself. And we can
Mhm.
sort of reframe it or rebuild it or reprocess it and come up with a more well-rounded, nuanced, definition of
Mhm.
ourselves. I just thought it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, and like what happens when we repress emotions is initially, right, like can be very productive. It can like help,
Mhm.
keep you safe. It can, benefit you. And we do this also like here and there in our daily lives, right? Like, oh, like I'm really
Mhm.
stressed out or, maybe I'm sad about something and then I have to go
Yeah.
to work or then I have
Mhm.
to, like be on a phone call. So I think it's like
Mhm.
there's levels to it, but I think, the whole point is that like we do have to deal with things eventually that
Mhm.
or like we have really bad anxiety or we have
Mhm.
PTSD or we don't have like good relationships with people because we're keeping ourselves isolated. Like there's just so much
Mhm.
there that is
Mhm.
like all sorts and flavors of therapy and all sorts and
Mhm.
flavors of like mental health, clinical disorders that we like
Mhm.
assist with. I thought it was
Right,
wonderful.
exactly. Wonderful. And so let's talk about anxiety. Let's just talk about anxiety.
About myself.
Yeah, I know. But for real, I was like, this
Hmm.
is what anxiety feels like. And
Yeah.
I just loved how they kept trying to say, like, anxiety is trying to protect her, trying to
Hmm.
prepare her. Those were all the words they were using. And like, that is what it feels like to catastrophize.
Hmm.
Like, you are so scared of something happening, you're overestimating the probability of really bad things happening and underestimating your ability to cope with what's actually going to happen
Hmm.
and coming up with all the different scenarios. So, like, that anxiety projector where all the
Yeah.
cubicles were a house of cards and that
Hmm.
it's like on at night, like, such a perfect depiction
Hmm.
of what it is like to live with anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, running through all of these scenarios of like, okay, well, what if this happens? And then, kind of like you were saying before, with, if I don't, I'm trying to even think of just like teen examples like Riley had, if I don't wake up early enough to do my hair right, tomorrow, like they're not going to notice me. And then I'm going to not go to prom and I'm going to go to prom alone, even though that's in 4 years. And like, it
Mhm.
keeps going and going and
Yes.
going and going.
Yes, and at the very, very end of the movie, like, when they're just showing us, like, where everything stands now, I loved that something had happened. Oh, Riley was, like, waiting for the phone call to hear, like, did she make the team or not, and she was at the lunch table with all the hockey girls, so it showed, like, they're already friends, even if she doesn't make the team. Val says to her, "If it's not this year, you can always try again next year," and she's like, "Yeah, I know, I know." But you see in the mind, anxiety pops up and is like,
Mhm.
if we don't make the team, then we're not going to have any friends. And then we're not going to go to college. And then we're going to die alone. And then you see Joy walk anxiety over to this little like self care area with a
Mhm.
cozy chair where you put your feet up, you get some tea, there's candles nearby, it's a massage chair, and you just see like anxiety start to calm down. And I just loved it so much. It was like so such
Mhm.
a cute depiction
Yeah.
of like a good way to kind of like manage your
Mhm.
anxious thoughts when they're coming,
Right.
like call it what it is,
Mhm.
redirect and take care of yourself and
Mhm.
wait for them to kind of pass a little bit. Oh my gosh, but I just loved the projector. I loved when anxiety was really going, that it was swirling like a tornado and even anxiety couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
I was just like, that is so perfect. And I was
Mhm.
so happy to see them depict a panic attack
Mhm.
and what was going on, right? Like, they
Yeah.
got it right.
Yep. I think the part of the panic attack that I liked seeing was how it like it kind of no longer served anxiety either. Like,
Right.
when you're having a panic attack, it's like debilitating, paralyzing. Like there's no
Right.
really like thoughts that are like useful then. It's just
Right.
it's typically like the physical, right? Like the body takes over
Yes.
and it's, screaming at you to get safe or
Mhm.
figure it out. But like, the chest pain we saw,
Mhm.
her hand on her chest, like the heat sensation,
Yes.
she was really red, she was playing a game, but still,
But
like
she's sweating, she's breathing really
mhm,
fast, you're hearing her heartbeat, she, like, can't even, like, figure out a place to, like,
right,
look.
yep,
She's, like, really struggling in
mhm,
the little penalty box.
I know. And then the friends kind of see her because, like, panic attacks typically are so visible, right? Like
Mhm.
if someone's looking at you, typically they can tell. If
Hmm.
I guess what kind of what to look for, but
I was gonna
just
say
the rise and fall of the chest. Like you
yeah.
might be clenching fists even really close. You don't have to be like screaming, but just like there's this tension level,
I think a lot of
sweat.
people, like, from the outside might think you're having, like, a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
You might think you're having a heart attack. Like, panic
Exactly.
attacks are, like, one of the scariest things to go through. Most people end up in the ER, but what I love that they got right is that it has a very quick on and it doesn't last very long. That's a true clinical panic
Yep.
attack, right? That it's really quick and intense and you feel like you're going to die, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But that it does peter out, relatively
Yep.
quickly as well. But it's really scary and it's
Mm-hmm.
not uncommon to have several back to back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're exactly right that like once you're in that and you're in the swirl of anxiety, like nothing can get through to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't serve you anymore. Like sometimes, I see this a lot in my practice actually, people who are maybe high achieving, perfectionistic, type A, who feel, once they're coming to see me, they say like, I feel like anxiety has served me my whole life. Like it's helped drive me to get good grades and go to this school and do this job and be CEO or whatever it is. But now I feel like it's not working. And we have to have that conversation that like, that's different.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sort of drive or motivation or a little nerves to study for the test. That's like a, anxiety within normal limits or like a healthy
Right.
dose. What you're experiencing now is debilitating. Like it's getting in the way of your ability to play the game, like Riley was trying to do, or to sleep, or to
Mm-hmm.
eat appropriately, or like all of that stuff. It's getting in your way of like just enjoying your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's different. And a lot of people who come to see me are really scared that, like, if we start a medication like an SSRI, will it take away that drive that they have? And spoiler alert, no, it won't. And that's not the goal. The goal is to treat the excessive anxiety and those
Mm-hmm.
ruminative, perseverative thoughts that are on loop that you get stuck in.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do kind of feel scared to try a medication. I think I hear the biggest fear is like, I'm not going to be myself. And I think,
Right.
as in my role as a therapist, then recommending to speak with their prescriber about that is like, say that to them because they will then give you
Mhm.
a ton of good
Right.
information about like, why you are, as the prescriber, like looking out for that. And like, if you are,
Right.
trying to treat anxiety and the person's turning into a zombie, like then you're probably not on the right medication. You're not on the right dose. Like, and that, then you'll
Yeah.
work on that. So it's like just really trying to communicate, those questions that can absolutely be
Mhm.
answered. And then, being open and honest through the process. I really encourage people to do that. And often they then get a great, informational session from who they're seeing and feel much more
Mhm. Yeah.
comfortable and confident in trying something. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also that exact question brings up a really important point, which is that your sense of self is not defined by your anxiety or
Mm-hmm.
any of these feelings. We actually see that in this movie, right? Like joy and anxiety, they're all learning, like, we don't get to decide who Riley
Mm-hmm.
is. We're all parts of her. We are all important feelings. We all have a place, but we don't decide who you are. Same thing. Like if you're coming to see me and I think you could benefit from medication, it, they're not the medications, at least the ones I'm going to prescribe, like they don't get rid of your sense of
Mm-hmm.
self. They help you with this disease that is making it hard to like show up as your full
Right.
authentic self. Right?
Right.
The goal is that like you actually stay in touch with that real true self
Mhm.
way more because you're not worried all the time. or you're not sad, or you're not angry, or whatever
Mhm.
it is, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's like a great point. And I personally love having conversations like that. And I totally agree. I think it's really important. And I hope everyone, feels empowered to like have those conversations and talk to your providers about it. Cause that's not the goal. The goal, we're
Right.
not here to like um turn you into a zombie or make you feel numb or flat, or like that's not the goal.
Mhm.
Sometimes, depending on what the illness is, we might have to use a medication that has side effects. But we want to manage those. And the goal is to use the lowest possible dose that's therapeutic with the minimal, hopefully no side effects.
Mhm.
um, I kept wondering if Riley was gonna like, if like Zol Prozac was gonna like sprinkle down on
This
her.
little
But
ad.
yeah, but I'm glad we didn't go there, because again, at that age, that wouldn't be the
Mhm.
first thing you do,
Mhm.
right? What did you think about the grounding techniques that she used to come out of the panic attack, Portia?
Oh my gosh. I
That's when I
thought
just like started crying.
it was so spot on, and I think also very, like,
Subtle.
accessible, too, though.
Mhm.
Like, it wasn't like you're right, like, "Oh, and then Riley, we're switching her to, like, a doctor's office." It was like, no, in the
Right.
moment, everyone has access to these things.
Yes.
Like, everyone
Yes.
also will experience, heightened stress or heightened anxiety without it being clinical,
Right.
yet,
Mhm.
maybe
Mhm.
ever, where these are absolutely useful, and that I really appreciated. It didn't feel
Me
like,
too.
we're taking it to this clinical level.
Right.
And I think so normalizing anxiety, normalizing using coping skills just to like cope with
Yes.
life and stress. Yes, I thought they were awesome. What did you have a favorite one?
I just like, oh my God, I feel like once the anxiety started I mean, once we got to the projector, once the anxiety started swirling, Joy can't get in to help. Um, and like I was just so overcome with like how I was just thinking like, I am so glad my children are watching this and like absorbing
Mhm.
whatever they're absorbing now, but that it's going to be like a launching point for us to keep talking about anxiety, and that everything we're saying. And then to see the coping skills being used, it was so subtle. Like, I don't know if you would have picked it up if you didn't kind of have some knowledge
Mhm.
about this, but I saw it with the mom friend and her kids as well. And she was like, "Do you see that? She's using those coping skills." So it's like, I think people picked it up
Yep.
that, like, she's using touch by rubbing
Yep.
the seat she's sitting on. She's using sound by hearing the ice skating. She's using her sight. She takes a big deep breath. She's using
Mhm.
smell. I think she looks at the sunlight, like all of it. I just was so happy to see. And exactly what you said, I was so happy she was doing it in real time, coming out of the panic attack. She wasn't like popping a benzo,
Right.
she wasn't like whisked away in an ambulance. She wasn't like, didn't need to go see a therapist yet. Like just showing that like there's things you can do and they
Mhm.
work. And again, just like you're saying, whether this is like a one-off thing, we all can experience this. And, anytime we're under
Mhm.
significant stress, or if this becomes like a regular thing for her, like she's already got some coping skills that she's just naturally
Mhm.
doing. And I think it's such good modeling for everyone watching, child or adult.
Yeah, no, totally. I think also just like clarifying, like panic attacks are almost like I think of them as like almost like a behavior, and then versus like that can occur without an anxiety diagnosis, that can occur
Mm-hmm.
with an anxiety diagnosis. And then we have like specifically panic disorder, which is when you're
Mm-hmm.
having, panic attacks and then you are doing things to kind of like avoid having them. So you're really
Right.
afraid about having another one. Typically, you are kind of having a lot of panic attacks because you're thinking about it a lot. Um,
Right.
but
You might
there's,
be like, yeah, that can lead to like some agoraphobia or
mm-hmm,
school avoidance we
yep,
see like in kids or teens if they're happening at school. Or like if you had a panic attack in one location, like before a big test, I see this
mm-hmm,
a lot. Then you might like not go to that location anymore. You might avoid taking that test if you need to take it for your
right.
job or career. Yeah, it's so universal, the feeling of
Mm-hmm.
panic.
And I guess I like that you said avoidance because I feel like also we are all good at avoiding things that, and we should to an extent, right? Like things that are bad, like or scary or dangerous. Like, yeah, like we should avoid. That's that healthy anxiety
Yes.
voice. But
Right.
also, I think like avoidance is kind of like the anchor of like an anxiety disorder,
Mhm.
also like PTSD.
Mhm.
It's like a big section of that diagnostic
Mhm.
criteria. And if you
Mhm.
think about it, like it's just, I think, the loop. It's like we have the trigger, the kind of bad experience, whether it's a panic attack or just
Mhm.
like something happening, and then the avoidance, and then we
Mhm.
avoid the emotions, and then they build up. Like it just kind of goes on and on
Mhm.
and on and
A
on.
big loop. Yeah. Yeah. And then the ending, I just loved when all the emotions embrace her sense of self. When Joy
Mhm.
realizes it can't just be all positive. When Joy pulls in anxiety and they're all embracing it. And then the self pops up that has all different parts
Mhm.
of her. I love it. And at the very end, when I think it was Joy just talking about, like, yep, that's our girl Riley. We really love her. She's a good friend, but sometimes she's selfish. And I wrote down, then she said, occasionally she can do the wrong thing and be too hard on herself, but we love every bit of our girl, every beautiful, messy piece of her. And I was just like, that's the goal, right? To just like love yourself, all the good and the bad. And
Mhm.
I think like that's what all humans are working on, walking around, and
Yeah.
what we want to see like in our relationships
Mhm.
reflected back to us. Like I could like,
Mhm.
oh, it's just great.
It is. It's really just like a beautiful message for all ages, for
But
all,
I think it's,
understanding of mental
yeah.
health.
But I think especially right now, knowing that, especially coming out of COVID, that
Mm.
rates of anxiety are so high among teenagers, just like a perfect time for this movie to be released. I just
Yeah.
love it.
And
Love it. I hope there's a third.
I know, me too. I hope there's like 10, let's
I
like,
know.
and they just keep coming out, so I can, I need to know what's coming, and like
Yeah.
midlife crisis. I want to see
Yeah.
midlife crisis,
Me
Riley.
too. I want to like keep like watching this to like help parent my kids. Like this is
Mhm.
so great to have this
Mhm.
and to be able to have it as like a launching pad for
Yeah.
awesome discussion. So,
Yep.
whew,
Yeah.
thank you
Before
so
we
much
wrap
for,
up,
yeah,
my gosh, we could talk about this for like 24 hours, but I did
forever.
want to comment on one of my favorite lines of the movie was
Oh,
when
yes.
Joy was walking. They were like, trying to find their way back to get the sense of self and then take it back, where Joy is like, of course I'm delusional. I can't be
Yes.
positive all the time. You know how much work that is? Like, of course I'm delusional. And I was like,
I
I,
know.
I really like just needed to hear that or have that be like kind of demonstrated. Cause like, yeah, like the point is not to be joyful all the time. And if you are, like, sometimes we consider that like
Sometimes we call
mania.
that mania.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like that's
And I
not
loved too when they
helpful.
were, at the anxiety projector and Joy starts, putting up these positive
Mhm,
things like,
yes.
"And then we make the USA team, and then we bring a weary nation to victory, blah, 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 blah." And then I
Mhm.
think sadness is like, "Oh, Joy, we should really be realistic though." Just
Yeah.
like, it's so great.
Yep. That was
I
a
love
great
it.
voice. You
Oh
hit
my god,
that,
thanks.
nail on the head.
Maybe I could be a voice actor, you
Yeah.
never know. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Analyze Scripts. We would love to hear what you thought about the movie,
Mhm.
and what you think about our analysis. So please check us out on Instagram, TikTok, and you could watch this episode on YouTube at Analyze Scripts Podcast. And we will catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.